Welcome to another episode of the Fired Up for Friday podcast. The podcast letting you know what has me fired up for Friday. That's why it's called that. This week we've got another banging week, but it's a little lighter of a week. We got more in the heavy metal, traditional metal, and some doomstoner and psych rock. We got one brutal ass album wrapping it all up. And of course, we got the album of last week, which was the best album last week. Real quick, some housekeeping duties. Thank you, Bands Labels PR, for sending all this stuff over for me to check out and share with you fans of these bands. And if you're in one of those bands and you want to be on the Metal Institute of Thrashology, the Fired Up for Friday podcast, or any other aspect of the Metal Institute of Thrashology, reach out to me at metalinstituteofthrashology@gmail.com, all one long-ass email address. And if you happen to see something you like that you want to let me know that you're pumped up for this Friday, let me know in the comments. And if you don't see something on here that has you fired up for Friday, chances are I don't know about it. Please let me know in the comments. And if you happen to see some stuff you like here, smash that like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. It helps me, and it helps other metalheads discover new metal, which is what this whole channel and project is about. So without further ado, let's dive on in and see what has me fired up for this Friday, July 10th. We're in July already. July 10th. French thrashers in Slaught have released a fiery, explosive new album that's an ode to the old school in a high and heaviest of respect is paid. In Metallic Torments, their sophomore effort off Gates to Hell Records, great name for a label. A rowdy mix of thrash with some new wave of British heavy metal influences, with bright leads, gritty vocals, and bass lines that's thicker, maybe even juicier than a slab of bacon. And Slaught reminds me of the Paul Diano Iron Maiden, mixed with the grit and passion of Burton-era Metallica, and I was in after song 1, with shifting tempos and feels, kept my head banging and my heart racing over these 8 tracks that have no fill to slow these madmen down. Filled with your typical metal lyrics, vengeance, battles, witchcraft. These seasoned salty sophomores could have sang Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and I'd have started paddling. Their last release was a split with Temptation, and that was 8 years ago. And this is their first full length in 11 years. Metallic Torments is exactly what it says it is. It's a metallic offering of an album that's surely gonna torment your ears. But isn't that why you love thrash in the first place? No one wants a ballad, we want it heavy. And it seems Slaught knew that and gave you a heaping serving. Thank you, sir. Can I have another? I'm giving this album an 84, which is probably the year that they pulled the most influences from. What was your favorite album from 84? If you love metal from 1980 to 1988, you're gonna love this. And Iron Maiden's Power Slave is the only acceptable answer for the best album of 84. After wrapping up Slaught's Metallic Torments, let's keep it in the 80s. It's a great decade for metal. Here's another album that has a ton of 80s feels. With racing guitars, gritty vocals, and a powerful low end, Norway's Sinsid return with their latest album, All That Remains, off of Pitch Black Recordings. Stripping away all the fat, All That Remains is a streamlined rager, leaning closer to new wave of British heavy metal and new wave of traditional heavy metal rather than the thrash of Slaught. And All That Remains is filled with fiery fretwork, venomous vocals, and racing rhythms. And by the end of the album, I was looking for the keys to the Irata. But this modern production still leaves a ton of grit on this album. And that aggressiveness in the vocals reminds me of bands like Accept, Diano-era Maiden again. And that similar style, bordering on heavy metal, but bordering on that punk attitude too. Guitars are king for me on this album, and I hear everything from Priest and Maiden to GNR and Metallica. But I'd have to say, this reminds me a lot closer to Tower, which is a modern heavy metal band from New York City, and the music they put out is very similar to the music that Sinsid puts out, incorporating all that classic rock, heavy metal feels, just culminating into one just kick-ass album. And it still has those 80s feels, but it has modern attack and modern aggression. And who doesn't love some aggression in metal? This isn't jazz. Well balanced. While this album doesn't do anything groundbreaking, legendary, or mesmerizing, this album is just what I want from a band like this. Straightforward, no frills, no gimmicks, all killer metal. And it's high quality too. A great follow-up to Iron Slaught. I'm giving Sinsid an 80, which was one of the heaviest years in history. My fat ass was born. Fuck, I'm old. While I live in Pittsburgh currently, many people don't know that I lived in North Carolina for years. And I've been all over the state, from its cities to its beaches to its winding interstates. And there's one thing I can say about North Carolina, no matter where you go, whether it's the beaches, the cities, or the woods, they're hospitable. And I think I can say the same about the rockers from North Kakalaki and Irata. I hope I said that right. You probably pronounce this word like 30 different ways. So if I butchered it, I'm sorry. Another album that's bordering on those heavy metal groove rock tones, yet it keeps spilling over into that stoner rock and psychedelic genre. But it all culminates in one ear-grabbing effort in Human. That's what the album's titled, Human. And that's exactly what it is. And just like a real human experience, this album has ever-shifting tones, tempos, and feels that are almost as unpredictable as my wife's emotions. These fuzzy tones and groovy rhythms exude life all over this album, something that artificial stupidity can't mimic yet. It's all slop, with atmospheres as expansive as the horizon and tones as bright as the sunny beaches. This patient, well-paced offering is the perfect addition to playlists. Whether you're headed to Topsail or Wrightsville Beach for the afternoon, or maybe you're traveling to catch a Durham Bulls game, or even after a long day of work, wrapping it up at a fire over in Asheville, this feel-good album reminds me of how great it is to be an actual human. And it's the perfect soundtrack to do human-type shit. For fans of bands like The Powers and Howling Giant and Sergeant Thunderhoof, I also hear some more commercial sounds, like some Soundgarden and maybe even some odes to Nirvana. They kind of sneak those influences right in there. While it doesn't sound like them exactly, if you really pay attention and look for it, that's what I hear. Which is a great accompaniment and really adds to the whole being of this album. The human being, maybe? And while this is for a ton of bands, shit, this is for everyone. Unless you like country, you probably just like shitty music at that point. I probably wouldn't listen to this album if I liked shitty music. So if you don't like shitty music, try this album at least once. Discover something new. Because sometimes this is hazy, sometimes this feels a little bit grungy, but all the time it feels kick-ass. I'm giving this one because it was a summer of 79. It was a summer of 79. The 60s are dead, metal killed them, moving on. And now we're halfway through this week's releases. If you found some stuff you like, make sure you don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button so you don't miss next week's episodes. And there's gonna be some more episodes in the back. Check out what you missed from earlier in 2026. They're not going anywhere. They'll be there forever. Unless they get thrown off of this platform. I've been threatened several times. Idaho Desert Rockers and Ealdor Bealu, I'm pretty sure I jacked that up, have released their latest full-length, Graves of the Silent Plain, off of Ripple Records. And if you don't know Ripple Records, go fix that, because Ripple Records has an awesome roster. And Ealdor Bealu is no exception. They're awesome too. and Graves of the Silent Plain feel right at home on the range. And while I usually associate the West with cowboys and country music, I ain't kissing my cousin, but this desert rock album has heavy doses of psychedelia. And this album feels just as warm as those parched properties out west. And Graves of the Silent Plain is an expansive album where Ealdor Bealu takes listeners on a trail, still kind of feels exploratory and exciting. The contrasting vocals echo almost as vast and encompassing as the Owyhee Desert, and the tones on this album snake in and out of my ear canal like its sister serpentining in the mighty Owyhee River. Uncompromising, this album feels like nature, sort of like it is what you make of it. Some moments on this album feel very deep and weighty. However, the next time you revisit this album, it might feel bright and airy, as it depends on where your ear and, more importantly, your mind is at the time you press play. And just like every travel or visitation, the more you visit and revisit in this case, the more it becomes part of you and you become part of it. And Graves of the Silent Plain is no different. And I'm giving this thought-provoking album a 79. Why? Because there's a canyon there that's deeper than the Grand Canyon. It's called Hell's Canyon. And if you know me, you know that I plan on spending the rest of eternity in hell. And coincidentally, it's 7,993 feet to the bottom of Hell's Canyon. Hence the 79. Bringing more than killer riffs, dropping knowledge on that ass with thrash facts. Let's keep these good vibes flowing. Portland Slow Goat is dropping their debut full length, Where the Wisest Fear to Tread. And I'm not scared because I'm excited to tell you about this album. For fans of bands like Ruby the Hatchet, Castle Rat, Restless Spirit, and some of those other bands, those groovy doom and stoner rock bands that borrow influences and grooves from all over music, polishing them up and, making it their own. Frontwoman Rosie Peterson puts all your fears and hesitancies to rest, as her sincere yet seductive vocals almost draw you in like one vulnerable note at a time. And just in a few magical moments, her voice can shift from those softer, feminine tones to those passionate wails where you can almost feel her vocal cords trembling, and fuck, my knees are weak. In the pocket, drumming with a few whacks of the cowbell and enough groove to make the string section shift on a dime from some bluesy tones to those classic rock tones of mountain and maybe even cactus. And I got a lot of questions about this album that didn't come in the press release. How the fuck does a debut sound this good? Why did you wait so long to release something like this? When the shit are you playing Pittsburgh, and how much are tickets? And as I said earlier, this is for fans of those bands like Ruby the Hatchet, Castle Rat, Temptress, and those powerhouse doom and psych rockers just jam-packed with femininity. Is that a word? Did I just make that up? And this is seriously, all joking aside, this is a phenomenal debut. That every time I press play, it seems to get better than the last spin. So why not just keep spinning it? Why let it stop? It's well worth your time, and I'm giving this one an 85, which was the temperature of the pool today as I was floating in it, looking at the clouds and making shapes. Damn, this album's poetic. Since we've been dabbling in melody, harmony, groove, and poetry, I have to have something for those heavyweights who just need to crush everything. Don't worry, I didn't forget about you. Decapitating heads and snare drums, Russia's Cranial Osteotomy are unleashing their first full length in 15 years. Vortex of Dark Knowledge off of Comatose Music. And I'm thinking no one's coming out of a coma after this intense, brutal slam death metal album is done with you. Oddly, between the blackening vocals and the sheer abuse of that snare drum, there's riff after riff of groove, which I didn't expect, and quite honestly, I find it hard not to give myself whiplash. And I'm not a big fan of that brutal or slam death metal, and the more grotesque it is, usually the more boring I find it. As I worked in a trauma center's operating room for years, and I've actually witnessed most of the procedures that these bands speak of. So for those of you who don't know, a cranial osteotomy is the reshaping of some bones in your skull, as the vortex of dark knowledge might reshape your skull with some violent, brutal death metal. Cranial osteotomy is not holding back, and is for fans of bands like Dying Fetus, Suffocation, and Devourment. This thing's heavy, and I personally wish the guitars were just a tad bit more forward, so my deaf ass could hear them just a little bit more. They were great. But I guess I just have to go back and listen to the album a couple more times now, don't I? You should too. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a huge fan of this style of death metal, so I might have this scored a little lower than fans of this type of metal would be. I'm gonna give this album a 77, a pair of the Grim Reaper sickles. But if you're a fan of that slam and brutal death metal, I suspect it'll be a lot higher than what I gave it. Now that we're wrapping up this week's releases and we're moving on to next week, it's a great time for you to smash that like and destroy the subscribe button so you don't miss next week's episode. Now, the album of last week. I didn't start getting into doom, stoner rock, and psych metal till about 2023-2024, so I didn't discover this band until last week's release, The Devil in All His Works by Witchsorrow. Now to be fair, if you're a doom band and you're coming from England, you better be bringing your A game because there's a long lineage of depression behind you. You ever hear Black Sabbath? They invented doom and metal. Slowing down molasses. Witchsorrow's patience was like the forbidden fruit for me, as I love thrash, speed, face-melting riffs. Yet I was met with dark, chilling, and quite honestly some scary riffage that seemed to want to extinguish everything it touches. So I decided I was gonna lock the door, turn on the lights, and give this a go. And to be fair, I'm a huge fan of the Devil and all of his work. Who isn't? In this album, The Devil in All His Works, if you're fans of bands like Electric Wizard, Cathedral, Saint Vitus, and those dark, slower, droning almost feels, and it was obvious I'd be a fan of this. Did you not hear who this sounds like? Of course I love this! And now, I'm gonna head over and check out their back catalog too, because I just discovered them and I'm so eager to dig deeper. So now we got another badass week in the books. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you all the bands, and thank you so much for you guys for hanging out with me another week. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And most importantly, see you in the pit.